Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dhari. Jasodanandana Brajajanaranja. Jasodanandana Brajajanaranja. Yamuna Tira Vanachadi. Yamuna Tira Vanachadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivara Dhari. Ballabha Girivara Dhari. Jasodanandana Brajajanaranja. Jasodanandana Brajajanaranja. Yamuna Tira Vanachadi. Jamuna Tira Vanachadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Or Premanandi. Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 18. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Naṣṭa-prāyeṣu abhadreṣu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki naṣṭa-prāyeṣv abhadreṣu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. Translation: by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome, abhadreṣu, to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. This verse is describing the naṣṭa stage of bhakti, and that's why it says almost completely. It's a stage of bhakti. What's being described, well, completely, but it's a stage where it's almost completely. Or prayeṣu, naṣṭa-prāyeṣv, almost completely. So that's the naṣṭa stage. Purport. Here's the remedy for eliminating all inauspicious things within the heart, which are considered to be obstacles on the path of self-realization. The remedy is the association of the Bhagavatas. There are two types of Bhagavatas, namely the book Bhagavata and the devotee Bhagavata. Both the Bhagavatas are competent remedies, and both of them, or either of them, can be good enough to eliminate the obstacles. A devotee Bhagavata is as good as the book Bhagavata, because the devotee Bhagavata leads his life in terms of the book Bhagavata, and the book Bhagavata is full of information about the personality Godhead and his pure devotees, who are also Bhagavatas. Bhagavata book and person are identical. Paragraph. The devotee Bhagavata is a direct representative of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. So, by pleasing the devotee Bhagavata, one can receive the benefit of the book Bhagavata. Human reason fails to understand how, by serving the devotee Bhagavata and or the book Bhagavata, one gets gradual promotion on the path of devotion. But actually, these are facts explained by Srila Narada Dev, who happened to be a maidservant's son in his previous life. The maidservant was engaged in the menial service of the sages, and thus he also came into contact with them, and simply by associating with them and accepting the remnants of foodstuff left by the sages, the son of the maidservant got the chance to become the great devotee and personality Srila Narada Dev. These are the miraculous effects of the association of Bhagavatas, and to understand these effects practically, it should be noted that by such sincere association of the Bhagavatas, one is sure to receive transcendental knowledge very easily, with the result that he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. The more progress is made in devotional service under the guidance of the Bhagavatas, the more one becomes fixed in transcendental loving service of the Lord. The messages of the book Bhagavata, therefore, have to be received from the devotee Bhagavata, and the combination of these two Bhagavatas will help the neophyte devotee to make progress on and on. It's a nice roadmap. So this is describing several things. The stage of bhakti, both anartha-nivritti in principle and the next in the 9 stages of bhakti, that is the naṣṭa stage. So both anartha-nivritti and naṣṭa. And the principle emphasized here, of course, there's topics of the personality of Godhead, but that's what happens when you associate with the Bhagavata, the person Bhagavata. The person Bhagavata is enthusiastic, always, to be engaged in topics of the book Bhagavata, or transcendental literature describing name, fame, qualities, pastimes, form, etc. of the Supreme Lord, because for the Bhagavata that means contact with Bhagavan. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar by any means, but Bhagavata means in relation to Bhagavan. Bhagavan, we know the meaning, it's the possessor of all opulences in full. And the Bhagavan conception is the final conception, compared to the Brahman and Paramatma conception. They're of the absolute truth, of the same nature, and then the complete form is Bhagavan. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti. So, of the nature of the absolute truth, going back some verses, that's the sincere aspirant of spiritual life has that interest. They want to leave the temporary and enter into the realm of the eternal, Sat. So there are different categories of those aspirants, but here it's describing in particular the aspirant for the Bhagavan stage of realization, which comes about by serving the book and or the person, Bhagavata, in relation to Bhagavan. And as explained, human reason fails to understand. It's true, but how human reason fails to understand. So if human reason fails to understand, what are we supposed to do? You can try to reason, but it's insufficient. The principle can be understood, the principle can be explained very reasonably. Here's an example, classic example. Iron rod in fire. Iron rod doesn't have the qualities of fire, but in association with fire, fiery qualities are accepted by the iron rod. And in time, the iron rod can become transformed into fire. That is to say, it acts like fire. When touched anything, it will burn. That anything that it touches. Similarly, that's the principle. So similarly, the principle of coming in contact with Bhagavan through sound, because the book Bhagavata is the sound representation of Bhagavan. Bhagavata representing Bhagavan. And by contact with that sound vibration, it's the iron rod becoming fire-like. And then eventually one can say it's no longer iron rod only, it's fire. How can you say that? By thy characteristic, lakshana, touch it to something, the something burns. And then comes the modes of nature, this, that, and the other. Mode of nature and fire in touch with the spark of fire in touch with different modes is going to have a different result. But the unlimited, as opposed to the limited, will burn. And similarly, the limited, that's the person Bhagavata, can act to make something also fire, depending upon the modes of nature. And even hearing the sound vibration, it eliminates the lower modes. That's described in another verse. The kama abhadreṣu, the influence of passion and ignorance are diminished, and when they're by contact with bhakti, and when they're diminished, what's left? There's something that's left, and this mode of goodness is left, and the mode of goodness helps one or enables one to do the bhakti, perform the bhakti process more effectively. So, in other words, the regulations are subordinate to the principle. The regulations of becoming mode of goodness are not to be trashed, but they're subordinate to the primary principle. And the primary principle is devotional service. It's really quite simple. If it's not easy to understand, it has to do with the contamination of the soul and a long-standing stubbornness to stay in the conditioned state. And that's the challenge of the person Bhagavata. Nonetheless, the person Bhagavata, understanding the interest of Bhagavan, or the book Bhagavata giving the teachings of Bhagavan and about Bhagavan, the person Bhagavata takes the thankless task of trying to revive the dormant consciousness that's already there. People like controversy. Somehow. It's like yummy, controversy. So for a while there was a wave, just sharing with you, one of the controversies. It didn't get very far. But there was a young fellow who was giving a teaching that says bhakti isn't inherent. Now there's abundant teaching that says bhakti is inherent. Nitya Siddha, not just bhakti, but Krishna prema. It's already there, and just to be awakened. And the bhakti process awakens that which is already there, because it's dormant. Prabhupada would give this example so many times. These young Western European boys, girls, they didn't know anything, etc., etc. But by contact with chanting in the bhakti process, they're now ready to give up material affinity and adopt a life of strong devotion. How is that? Because it's already within. And the bhakti process, starting with chanting, awakens. To awaken that which is dormant, some covering has to be removed. So it does both. It cleanses and awakens. But it's already there. So there was this fellow who wrote a book on it's not already there. But he put it as a question and then made the argument, bhakti is bestowed. Bhakti is bestowed, not that bhakti is already there. As if bestowing bhakti isn't needed. I mean, those who say bhakti is inherent don't say bhakti has to be bestowed, but it's like, it's something like, there was one professor in Los Angeles who was meeting with Prabhupada, and he wanted to hear Prabhupada's take on Immanuel Kant's philosophy. He was a philosophy professor, and he happened to be an appreciator of Immanuel Kant's philosophy. And his philosophy says that the soul is manifest, not eternal. The soul is manifest from nothing to souls being manifest. A philosophy that said like that. And Prabhupada, what was Kant's philosophy? And he heard his philosophy and said, no, the soul is eternal. Najayate mriyate va. The soul isn't jayate or mriyate. It's neither born nor it dies. It's eternal. Ajo nityam shashvatam. So, shashvata, the soul is eternal. Similarly, this fellow was saying, bhakti isn't inherent, but it's bestowed. He wrote a book. Inherent or inherited, question mark. The controversy didn't have many legs because devotees fortunately read Prabhupada's books, and it's not just Prabhupada's books, it's our disciplic succession, and anybody that knows the Vedas. The soul is eternal. And soul, the bhakti is of the soul. It needs to be awakened, yes. So the awakening is the contact with one who is carrying bhakti. Yes, that's not being denied. But it's already there, it just has to be awakened, as opposed to by contact with one who's carrying bhakti, something that wasn't there is now suddenly there. Because someone's very kindly filled up this big hole in the heart, and bhakti entered. But there was nothing there before it. Not so. It's there. The bhakti process is awakening that which is already there. So enough of that controversy. This young fellow went so far as to say, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a stork story. You know what the stork story is? Where do babies come from? Supposing a child asks, Mommy, Daddy, where did I come from? And the answer is given, a stork brought you here. You know that one? It's a Western, what you tell the child that can't understand reproduction, just a stork. And there's paintings, there's a little, like a diaper and a baby being suspended by the stork, from the stork's beak, and he's lying in the diaper, and the stork drops or descends and delivers the baby to mom and dad. So that's where you came from, the stork story. So this fellow had the audacity, offense, not just audacity, to say Bhaktivinoda Thakur told the stork story. And then everyone else that says the same thing. One of the devotees that was challenging this fellow asked him a question. Do you agree that you exist or not? Are you a person or not? And the answer was potentially, to defend his philosophy. I'm potentially a person. That's Hume. I'm potentially a person, but I'm not a person until it's bestowed. It's really, anyway, back to the Bhagavatam. It's there, bhakti is intrinsic, and there's a process of awakening, and that's this, it's hearing topic, so it's nityam bhagavata sevaya. The example is given of Nard in his previous life. He not only did menial service to the Bhaktivedantas, but he also heard. As he was bringing their meals, he sat, and they allowed him to sit and hear their talks. And by hearing their talks plus the service, something happened. the bhakti that was dormant awakened. Now one could take the position, wrongly, it's only because there was nothing inside and somebody put something inside. When there was nothing inside, then he had something. Rather, bhakti awakened. And as bhakti awakened in the son of a maidservant, and he became Narada, so any one of us can also have that bhakti awakened. And the message is, as bhakti is awakened, the abhadreṣu, so this is the anartha vritti, anartha, another exchange word similar from anartha, is abhadra. Bhadra is auspicious, abhadra is inauspicious. Artha is something wanted, anartha is something unwanted. So they aren't exactly exchangeable. They have shades of meaning, but one can see strong similarity, overlap of the meanings of these two words. And the unwanted things in the heart is filled with unwanted things. And the more one becomes conscious about the process of hearing and serving, then the more one is likely to realize the stuff inside, the unwanted things inside that I never knew were there. And then there's more, and then there's more, and then there's more, and then there's more. But the cleansing process doesn't change. The cleansing process, for at least one of the parts of what goes on, is one can realize what's there that doesn't belong there, that I wasn't realizing before I started the cleansing process. I'm remembering a nice example that one devotee who was the president in Los Angeles for some time, named Karandar, he had so much service. And he said to Prabhupada that I have so much service. As I'm doing this so much service, I feel that my heart is becoming more cluttered than before I was a devotee. How to understand that? Am I doing something wrong? And Prabhupada's reply was, you're doing something right. He gave the example, if you go into a house that's been neglected for years and years and decades, and you start to try to make it clean, what happens? The cleansing process results in dust flying around the room. And if the dust is flying around the room, you notice there's dust flying around the room. But if you keep cleaning, eventually you become clean. The dust won't be flying around the room. Everything becomes clean in course of time, following the right process of cleanliness. Similarly, the heart has so many things, and they're settled, like dust is settled on furniture or whatever. And as you start to clean, it goes flying around. Because it no longer settled, it's now active and moving, etc. So it's quite okay. In fact, it's a good sign, not a bad sign, if one, by the bhakti process, finds there's chaos going on inside. And I was, it's disorienting. Am I doing something wrong? Kind of question. That was Karandar's question to Prabhupada. It's a sign you're doing something right. Now, what do you do when you're doing something right, yet there's dust flying around or there's abundant anarthas? You just continue with the process. That's what this verse is saying. Naṣṭa-prāyeṣv abhadreṣu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Nityam literally means eternally or always. And Prabhupada very generously has said regularly, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Bhagavati, unto Bhagavan, is Bhagavati. Uttama shloke, choice verses, shloke, uttama shloke, the topmost slokas or verses glorifying Bhagavan. Bhagavati uttama shloke, bhaktir bhavati. Bhavati comes into being. Bhaktir bhavati comes into being. It becomes awakened by these two things, hearing and service, unto the book or the person or both. Bhagavata. Bhaktir bhavati naṣṭa becomes naṣṭa, same verbal root. Naṣṭa and naṣṭa becomes an irrevocable fact, or the naṣṭa stage is approached on the other side of anartha-nivritti, or a maturing stage of anartha-nivritti. Naṣṭa comes next. That's in Bhagavatam language describing the 9 processes of bhakti, or say it the other way, Rupa Goswami has extracted from the Bhagavatam the 9 stages, not process, but 9 stages of bhakti. So this verse is directly illuminating Rupa Goswami's teachings, or Rupa Goswami's teachings are directly drawing from this illumination. And it's just made it approachable and simple. Hare Krishna. Discussion. Is that the old or the new? You're going to try and see if it works?
I'm going to keep it far.
You're going to do what?
Keep it far. Just
keep it far.
Yeah.
Let's see how it works. Go ahead.
Question.
Yeah.
It's about the mode of goodness to be subordinate to the primary principle, bhakti. The confusion I have is how important it is to come to the mode of goodness practices, provided there is less time and resources. That's the question I'm having. How important it is.
It's subordinate, but important. Let's take cleanliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Supposing you want godliness, how important is cleanliness?
Yes.
But it's secondary, because cleanliness isn't godliness. It's next to godliness. Mode of goodness is one of the symptoms is cleanliness. So is it important? How important is your question? You follow it, but follow it with the purpose, not just for there's some people have a, what's the word, obsession about cleanliness, and they're not Krishna conscious, they're not devotional.
I have a difficulty there.
Why?
To cultivate the quality like cleanliness, I feel like I don't have so much determination or so much time and energy. Better go to Krishna, then I get some energy, and maybe then I can work around being clean like that.
Well, but you can't neglect cleanliness. Your question was, how important is it? It's important. Supposing I want to go to Krishna and remain dirty, you're not going to get very far. You're not going to get close to Krishna. Now, one could argue, wait a minute, Krishna is the supreme pure, so I get close to the supreme pure, I'll get clean, right?
Yeah.
How important is cleanliness? You can't get close to Krishna without cleanliness. Will Krishna make me clean? And if I'm not clean and I don't think about cleanliness, I just think about being close to Krishna? Well, it's some benefit for sure. There's transcendental and absolute benefit for even the unclean person. And will it make them clean? proportionate to bhakti. But is bhakti going to be best nourished by remaining unclean for whatever the reason? Habit, or whatever, time, whatever reason. I remain unclean, but I want to be close to Krishna. So it's going to impede one becoming close to Krishna. It's an impediment. And here's another dimension of the same thing. Bhakti means pleasing Krishna. So if I'm going to be making an offering to Krishna, is it just fine, keep everything a mess, and make the offering to Krishna in a mess? The kitchen is a mess, the altar is a mess, everything's a mess. But bhakti is what's important, so I'll just make my offering to Krishna with bhakti. It's not to say Krishna won't accept it, but it's weak. And depending, it could be an offense. Bhakti means pleasing the object, subject, object. Krishna is the object. He's to be pleased. So you want a back burner, take another quality if you like, but just on this one quality, cleanliness, you can back burner it. Let me focus, because I'm not good at time management, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just try to focus on bhakti. How important is cleanliness or any other quality? Mode of goodness quality, truthfulness. Go ahead. Lie. And I don't care, because bhakti is what's important. Ahimsa. Take any other quality. I can be violent in my speech and my action. It's okay, because I'm focusing on bhakti. So how important is you shouldn't have a problem. You may be more inclined this way and less inclined that way. Okay, you're a conditioned soul. And bhakti is going to help you. But it's not like unimportant. For the pleasure of Krishna, it's important. Secondary follows the primary, but it's not unimportant. It's a byproduct and subset of the primary.
A small confirmation, because we also see here that just chant, be happy, kind of fitting for a beginner, because...
You want to speak into the microphone in case there's some people online that want to hear what you're saying? Chant and be happy instead of focusing on...
For a very beginner, because...
Okay.
That is fine.
So it's just fine, chant and be happy. And then as they chant and become happy, that is, the suffering that arises due to material contact becomes diminished. Then it's not just chant and be happy, but chant and be happy. Doesn't change. But then there's details and details and details. And then what's happiness is another thing. Bhakti, the essence of bhakti is Krishna's happiness. And I'm not thinking Krishna's happiness. I'm thinking, I want to be happy. I'm at the center and Krishna's over there somewhere. And real happiness is Krishna's everything. His happiness is everything. That's the driving force of my life. Something else?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have a thought. It's not related to today's class. It is something we discussed during our yatra. Can I ask him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I was listening to one of the lecture, and there you mentioned about the deities of Lord Rama, where it was handed almost about 16 times to different kings, and then finally to Madhvacharya, and then one of the Matha in Udupi. And now I was remembering during our Ayodhya Yatra, we went to the banks of Sarayu River where Lord Rama departed to the spiritual world.
Yes.
There is a temple there, and we saw the deities of Lord Rama there.
Yes.
And I am remembering that those were the same deities we described that Lord Rama gave to that Brahmana who will not eat anything until he will see Lord Rama. And the deities which we talked about during Madhvacharya's pastime.
It's the same deity.
It's the same pastime of that Brahmana.
And it's the same deity.
But those deities are in...
there's a conflict.
Yeah.
So which history is the correct history, please?
Yeah.
That's your question.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's not uncommon in relation to many things, including deities, the history of the deity. So what I spoke is from Madhvacharya's, these two personalities.
Biography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they wrote that history, including the history of the deity, and I'm just repeating what they said, or what they had written in their book. And then in Ayodhya, on the bank of the Sarayu, the pujaris have a different history.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're pointing out. And so, which is the correct history? Here's something related, but different but related. There were some devotees, Yasodhanandana and Guru Kripa specifically, they had a fascination for Lord Nrsingadev. So they went to Ahovalam. And when they went to Ahovalam, they heard that this is the place where Lord Nrsingadev appeared, up on that peak of the many temples in Ahovalam. So they asked Prabhupada a question. And the question was, my understanding is Lord Nrsingadev appeared in the place where Hiranyakashipu had usurped the kingdom of Lord Indra, which would have been in the heavenly realm. And Ahovalam is not in the heavenly realm, so which is it? Is it this or that? You follow? Yeah. And Prabhupada's answer was, he didn't say it's not this, it's that. He didn't say it's that, it's not this. He said, the mood of devotion unto Lord Nrsingadev is so prominent in Ahovalam, it's non-different. So did Lord Nrsingadev appear there or not? And he appeared there in a non-different sense, whether it's here or there. That was his answer. Now, I've repeated that to some devotees that are ardent Nrsinga Bhaktas, and they became red in the face, and they didn't like it. I don't accept that. This is the place where Lord Nrsingadev appeared. Okay. And for them, back to this, that's their faith. And that's what Prabhupada said. Same as this quote, Yadrashi Yadrashi Shraddha, Siddhi Bhavati. What's the other one? You sent me the other one. The Skanda Purana reference. You find it. Huh?
It says, as one's thoughts go, therefore the outcome will be determined.
Yeah, what's the Sanskrit, though? You sent it to me in WhatsApp. I don't have my phone.
Yeah, I have it.
Just so we can hear. But that's the principle. They have such faith, and there's been such faith for such a long time in Hovelam. Not different. That's their realization. We don't need to parse and get a knife out and say, it's not there, it's here, it's vice versa.
Yes, it's yadrishi bhavana, yes, sadir bhavati tadrishi. Wherever are one's thoughts, so will be the outcomes.
Yeah, that's it. I like Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of the word siddhi, and his siddhi translation is realization, because it's very much related to the whole of Brahma Samhita and how he rendered Brahma Samhita. So anyway, realization, bhavati, arises according to one's faith. And that's sufficient. It's like the question related to yesterday evening. It's different, but it's related. There's pastimes of Krishna, Radha Krishna, etc., that aren't in the Bhagavatam. And are they real? Or are they poetic expressions only? And we just put them in that parking lot? It's not real. The Bhagavatam is real. So it's similar dilemma, not the same, but similar. And then, we could stack up, well, how long has this view been in Ayodhya, and how long is this view from Madhvacharya? And you put on the pan scale, the history behind that view, that this deity that we saw. Anyway, so you can weigh them. There, can say it's okay that there's a difference in the view. Anything else? Yes.
Thank you for speaking on this wonderful verse, and specifically discussing the topics of whether bhakti is inherent versus imbibed by the association of a bhakta. What I find very interesting in this verse is how Srila Prabhupada adds something by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam.
Yeah, Nityam Bhagavat, that's just rendering it in that way.
Right, because the verse itself, by the translation itself, doesn't say anything about classes, attending classes. But I find it pretty brilliant how Srila Prabhupada, it's talking about having nityam, eternal or regular service of the Bhagavatam or the devotee Bhagavat, Sevaya. And so how Srila Prabhupada is, it seems to me, kind of bringing in that bhajana kriya aspect of Shravanam into this verse, kind of indicating how each successive stage includes within it the prior stages.
How what?
How each successive stage in the 9 paths, or the 14 paths that Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur describes, includes within it the prior stages. So to me, the way please correct me if I'm incorrect, the idea of bhajana kriya including the most important process of hearing, Srila Prabhupada is kind of magically bringing back into this verse by saying sevaya means attending the classes and hearing.
That's part of service.
Yeah. Because in the translations I've seen from Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami's translation of this verse doesn't have that, but Srila Prabhupada is adding something very sweet to this verse.
No correction from your statement. It's nice.
Thank you.
To say seva, what does seva mean? And he's chosen one aspect of seva. Hearing is seva. It's part of devotional service. One of the most important, the first and most important of the the activities of devotional service. So he's pointing to that. You could say more. You could say something else instead. But he's helping the unknowing audience to come to the stage of bhakti. That's what he's doing. By emphasis and by selection of emphasis, it's part of seva. It's like, just take this reflection that you just presented. Sometimes devotees like hearing and not other forms of seva. Some persons like seva and not so much hearing. Or hearing of this type, and not that type. And there's all seva. Okay, if it's all seva, then why make preference to this type of hearing? I'm thinking of a question recently asked. I like reading Srimad Bhagavatam. I can read for hours. However, I have difficulty having an attraction for chanting. And they mentioned another form of seva. Like, because it was the Tapo Divyam verse, Putra Krayena Shudyad Sattvam. I have difficulty with physical austerities, although I understand that is also part of service, what to do. So they're all part of service. The Tapo Divyam is also a service. The people can do tapa, and it's not service. But they can do Tapo Divyam, and it's service. And it's important. According to Rishabdev, it's a distinction that the human form of life has that other forms of life don't have. It makes you human. But human with a transcendental purpose. So you can unpack and then repack, and then unpack and repack. You may emphasize and then de-emphasize something else, but it's all part of seva. So it's quite okay to emphasize something. And he wanted to do that with his audience. This was written in Radha Damodar temple before he came. So he's preparing his Western audience to understand the Bhagavatam, which they're not going to understand without hearing initially. Anything else? Yeah. Go ahead. It's noisy, but go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for a wonderful lecture. You mentioned bhakti is restoring a lost or dormant connection with the Supreme Lord and a continuous process of cultivation of consciousness. On the 9 stages of bhakti, is it okay to do a self-assessment? And if it is okay to do a self-assessment, how do I know what stage I'm on?
How do I know?
In the process of 9 stages of success.
Just say the last part again.
Is it okay to do a self-assessment? If so, what is the process to do that?
What is the process to do that? Okay. Certainly it's okay. It's a symptom of mode of goodness that gets elevated by bhakti itself. So that's the introspective sage. You know the phrase from the Bhagavatam. So it's a characteristic of the mode of goodness. One becomes introspective. Now, in introspection, how do you gauge it? Which is your question. What's the process? There are 2 or 3 things that are essential, and there are other things that are helpful in the process of introspection. One is Scripture, because Scripture gives characteristics of something or many things. So let's say the symptom of the mode of goodness, or the symptom of bhakti that's beyond the mode of goodness. So you can introspect. If you know the Scripture, you can introspect according to the lakshana or the characteristics of the mode of goodness, or the characteristics of bhakti. And with the characteristics of bhakti, for example, there's 26, and of the 26, one is swarup lakshana. So evaluate according to the swarup lakshana. And then the secondary ones, and how strong are they? It's not like you have to give yourself a report card. It's just taking a look inside and see how am I progressing. A second, so your question is, what's the process? Is it okay with the process? I'll suggest a second, and that is, ask your wife. Or ask someone that knows you well. And I call that process our blind spots. There's some things that introspection I can see, and some things I just can't see. But those who are close to you and who are really caring, they can help you see. They can see things you may not be able to see. So you seek feedback, what your blind spots are. That's there's what you do after that, but there's just introspection is to see what's going on in there. And the third is, the principle of sadhu and guru in addition to shastra. So the starting point was no shastra. And then, there was a question in Atlanta. I'm a defective person. And I make 4 mistakes. So my understanding of Scripture is going to be defective. What to speak of the process of introspection is going to be defective. What about that? You have to work with what you have. So knowing, acknowledging, I'm less than perfect, I make mistakes, and I'm subject to illusion, and I have a tendency to cheat. And so knowing that's my default position, what to do, the process of introspection. Acknowledge it and be ready to refine and refine and refine. And so some of the other things that you can do that will help you refine is the third-party evaluation. And it's an ongoing, it's not once upon a time I did that. It's an ongoing, it's the nature of the mode of goodness, and it's the nature of Vaishnav. They're introspective. So those are some of the methods of introspection. They're helpful. I might say they're necessary. Anything else? Okay, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.